So just before we get started, can you hear me fairly clearly? Okay, great. I hope that this new setting is going to make it just a little bit better for everybody. So first of all, Tashidele, greetings to all Dharma friends. We hope that you are well and we hope that you are happy. So as usual, we are gathering today, but there is something a little bit special, a little bit exceptional about this day. And this is that today is the anniversary of the passing away of Lama Tsongkhapa, Ganden Namche. Sorry, loading up. Sorry, I think that I'm a very pasty person, and I noticed that the sun is kind of hitting me in a way that might make me even whiter than normal. So I'm going to close the curtain. Just excuse me for a moment. Sun is unpredictable this time of year. All right, there we go. So then, in terms of the passing away of Lama Tsongkhapa, which just very approximately, late 14th century, so happened approximately 500 years ago. He passed away into Parinirvana, and then the following year, they instituted this anniversary, the Ganden Namche of Lama Tsongkhapa, to celebrate his legacy. And then every year since then, all of those years ago until the present, this anniversary of Ganden Namche has been honored. And it is considered an exceptional time to engage in the practice of offerings, in the practice of accumulating merit, and so forth. And then so And so Ngacha is actually, sorry, it's a dialect thing. So Ngacha is actually considered the 25th of the month, which is celebrated as this anniversary of Lama Tsongkhapa, and Ngaji Nishaji is the 24th, and that is also an important anniversary in Asera Monastery and in other places. And so also in Tibet and in many other places, the 24th of the lunar month, right, is also considered a very important day. And the reason that the 24th is considered important it is the anniversary of the passing away of Jamchen Choje, who was a very important Lama who founded the Sera monastery. And so Jamchen Choje actually, he was a student of Lama Tsongkhapa, but he had an ordinary appearance. He didn't appear as exceptional. He was the person who took the duty of preparing Tsongkhapa's meals and so forth. And so his exceptional qualities became clear where there were repeated sort of invites from the emperor and from the royal court in China for Lama Tsongkhapa to go and engage in Dharma activities there. And Lama Tsongkhapa had to refuse that invitation. And so the royal court said, you should send someone who has qualities similar to yours. At that point, Lama Tsongkhapa sent Jamshin Chöje to take on that task. And it was then that his qualities became widely known. So why do we have to explain this? Because as usual in our gathering today, we are engaging in the accumulation of wholesome or of virtuous karma. However, due to this special time, due to this particular special occasion, it is said that the merits that we accumulate, they can be vaster, they can be more powerful. And so that is why we are pointing out the nature of this day. So if for someone who usually likes to take it easy, maybe like a little bit lazy, then these days where the merits are multiplied, right, it makes sense to engage in strident practice. So if we're somebody who finds it difficult to accumulate virtue, to engage in wholesome karma, because maybe we have time limitations or responsibilities and so forth, then identifying these holy days, these important Buddhist holidays, where the effects of merits are multiplied, this is something that would be good to do. And so then also, though many of you will be familiar with the practice, during these holy days, if you have received them before, then you can take the one-day Mahayana precepts, or also you can take the opportunity to recite the verses to kind of receive or renew the Bodhisattva vows. All of these are ways to kind of maximize on the potential of this day. And so amongst Tibetans, there's a lot of people that they have the habit of eating meat. And so for those that have the habit of eating meat, then on these festival days, they will keep a vegetarian diet, right, as a way of purifying and accumulating merit. So we need to have this idea that on this holy day where these merits are multiplied, that we are very fortunate to have this opportunity to come together and engage in the practice of virtue. And so, for example, in Dharamsala, also His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, he will come to participate in, elaborate rituals for the accumulation of merit and so forth. So this is really seen as an important day. So His Holiness, as he's kind of going down to the temple to participate in the ceremony, sometimes meets some of the local people, some of the older women living in the area, and he's sort of joking that, today is a very important time of Lama Tsongkhapa, and Lama Tsongkhapa was from the Amdo region, and I am also from Amdo, therefore Lama Tsongkhapa is very special. So we'll just take a moment to relax, to place the body and the mind in a peaceful state before we begin. Any unwholesome thoughts, any stress, any useless thoughts or feelings that are arising, let these fall away just as the rainbow dissolves into a sunny sky. So whatever phenomena are appearing in the sky, such as clouds and rainbows, it's really interesting to think how they appear on the basis of that space of the sky, but they also dissolve. They also dissolve back into the expanse on the basis of that sky. In the same way, when we take this moment to kind of stabilize and place our mind in a peaceful state, we understand that all of the discursive or the troubling thoughts and feelings, these arise on the basis of the mind, and they can also be cleared away on the basis of the mind. And also when we tap into that mind, we see that ultimate nature of that mind is pure luminosity, then we can see how we can build on that nature of pure luminosity to bring forth and stabilize what is good, what is wholesome, and also to clear away what is negative, what is disturbing. So whatever problem, whatever difficulty that we experience of samsara, this arises and is experienced on the basis of the mind. And similarly, it is on the basis of the mind, through bringing forth antidotes, wholesome and good thoughts, that those disturbances can be cleared away. So all happiness arises from the mind on the basis of the mind. Therefore, I will exert myself in accumulating these causes of happiness. And not just my own happiness, but I want to be able to come to a space where I can, not just myself, but all beings, others, all beings to happiness. I will work to bring forth this capacity. So in order to be able to accumulate the conditions necessary for this transformation, I will make requests to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas for their blessings. Oh, not so ganzen like that. Yeah. So as I said, it'll be a little bit different because of the nature of the occasion. So we will begin with the refuge and bodhicitta, which I'm sorry, Dave, I'm not sure if it's on the first or the second page of that Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga practice. And then after we do the refuge and bodhicitta, we'll go immediately to page 7 and engage in the actual practice. Sangye Chudan Sogye Chunam
Jancho Bardu Dani Kyatsuchi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sunangi Jola Benjir Sange Jobar Sange Chedan Zogi Chenamla Jancho Bardu Dani Kyatsuchi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sunangi Jola Benjir Sangye Jobar Sangye Chedan Sogi Chenam La Jangzhu Badu Dani Kyatsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sunangi Jola Benjir Sangye Jobar.
So we'll go to page 7, and it's a short practice. So we'll do the verses first in Tibetan, and then we'll go to English.
Anden lagi gungi tukane raga jose kunje chanjo se chiki kyapo kunken lo sonjo sedan jeba nende Jesus.
From the heart of the savior of the 100 deities of Tushita, on the peak of a cloud resembling a clump of extremely white fresh curd, king of Dharma, omniscient Lord Sangjapa, please come here together with your sons. So after establishing our motivation in the previous verses, we now come to this verse, which is the invocation, and it is at this point that we imagine Lama Tsongkhapa and his two sons, so that's Gyaltsabje and Khedrubje, descending from Tushita. And so as a preliminary to this visualization, what we want to imagine is that the environment, ourselves, others, all beings dissolve into emptiness. So think of that to the best of your any object that we perceive, there is that perception of the appearance. But if we try to find some truly existent aspect to pinpoint, we won't be able to find anything. And so then we imagine that in the distance in the realm of Tushita, from the heart of Buddha Maitreya, two strands of clouds come out. And these clouds are kind of long white clouds. You can think of them like two kathas, like two offering stars coming out from the sky. They're a beautiful kind of white hue, like fresh curd, like fresh yogurt. And then we can imagine also that these two lines of clouds, they are traveling from that realm of Tushita and they connect to us, representing connection to our mind. Beautiful white hue of fresh curd. Then we think, may I invite Lama Tsongkhapa together with his two disciples, Gyaltsabje and Khedrubje, to now descend to this place. Then we think that they appear and travel down those strands of clouds, and they appear directly in front of us. Lama Tsongkhapa and his two sons seated on beautiful clouds. So we imagine that as we look towards the merit field of Lama Tsongkhapa and his two sons, that surrounding us are represented by our mother and our father, and then behind them, all 6 types of beings within samsara. We imagine then human aspects, all of the problems that they experience in samsara we contemplate. We have to think, maybe with a little bit of dread or fear about how ourselves and all those beings behind us within samsara, their experience, they have accumulated all of the causes for those problems within samsara. And we think that all of these problems within samsara come from those causes. And those causes are accumulated on the basis of the 3 poisons: attachment, anger, ignorance. Then bring forth a mind of faith, thinking that the blessings, the inspiration of Lama Tsongkhapa and his two sons definitely has the potency, the power to be able to clear away the problems of samsara, as well as their causes. We imagine from contemplating this way, Tsongkhapa and the 2 disciples are pleased. They manifest lights and nectar that enter the body of thyself, all the assembled sentient beings. Imagine in this way, both myself and others, all of the physical problems, all of the mental problems, things have been completely cleared. The body is at ease and the mind is happy. Imagine experiencing that. From this space of joy and happiness that we've experienced, we will then engage in the practices of offering and so forth, the 7 limbs to Lama Tsongkhapa and his 2 disciples, as we continue with the practice. Think I'm accumulating merit and purifying obscurations through this practice of the 7 limbs, not just for my own benefit, but for the benefit of all of those 6 types of beings within samsara that I have visualized surrounding me. So we'll continue with the practice.
Dungi Nanga Senji Bede Don Jesu Lama Jebe Sukachi Taro Devi Suno Shisho Temba Gishu Kegya Shusu. In the space before me, on the lion throne, lotus and moon, my perfect pure Guru smiles with delight. Supreme field of merit for my mind of faith, please abide for 100 eons to spread the teachings. Sheje Gungun Jawe Lodro Du Kasan Nai Genjo Neshiku Jabe Degi Lama Zebe Tode Jebe Tede La Chance. Your holy mind has the intelligence that understands the full objects to be known, the full extent of objects to be known. Your holy speech with excellent explanation is an ear ornament for those of good fortune. Your holy body is radiantly beautiful with glory renowned. To you who are meaningful to see, hear, and remember, I prostrate. Yong Jaya Nazo Medo Dan Jishin Dukur Nasa Jishazo Mesha Michu Chujin Gazo Di Seno Shisho Chira Chirpa. Pleasing drinking water, various flowers, fragrant incense, light, scented water, and so forth. Oceans of cloud-like offerings, both actually arranged and mentally emanated. I offer to you the supreme field of merit. Kanji Tune Dune Saba Yi Lunga Yi Miki Chuchi Jeba Domba Sungi Midun Cho Nini Jeba Jabu Suso Shang. Whatever non-virtue of body, speech, and mind, especially those opposite to the three vows that I have collected from beginningless time, I confess each and every one with fervent regard from my heart. You strove for much learning and practice in this degenerate age, and made your freedoms and richnesses meaningful by abandoning the 8 worldly concerns. Savior, we sincerely rejoice in your extensive deeds. Jeju Lama Dhamma Jeno Je Chogi Kala Kense Chutsin Jita Zambe Deshi Zemala Zagi Chogi Chaba Watu. Perfect, pure, holy gurus from the billowing clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dharmakaya, please let fall the rain of profound and extensive Dharma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued exactly as we need. Kagi Jini Sabha Gewadi Kedong Jowa Kula Kompedong Yepa Jetsun Lozon Jabayi Tembe Nimbo Rindu Seje Sho. And we'll make the mandala offering, the short mandala offering for the teaching here. So And then we'll go right to page 12 for the Migzema. So Geshe would like just to make some brief comments about the Migzema before we begin the recitation.
And in terms of praises, the Miksema praise is said to be a praise that is particularly precious and particularly powerful in bestowing blessings. And so the common Miksema prayer, so there is the 9-line, but the most commonly recited prayer is the 5-line Miksema. And when you abbreviate the 5-line Miksema, it can be abbreviated to 4 lines. And so when we speak of the King of Secrets, Chana Dorje Dijwa, so then in terms of the aspirations or the supplications, the applications or the supplications, the Miksema prayer is kind of like the king of the aspirations or supplications. And so the Lamas, they say that, you know, in terms of the practices of completion and generation or completion and creation of Tantra, they are many in number, but the supplication is something supremely important. So why is, so when we say that supplications are extremely important, then the king of supplications is like this Miksema prayer. Why is this considered the king of supplications? Because it is said that within the supplications are the essence of the 3 Lord Bodhisattvas. So the 3 Lords, I just said to Geshe, maybe people aren't familiar with the 3 Lord Bodhisattvas and who they are. So the 3 Lord Bodhisattvas are Avalokiteshvara or Chenrezi of compassion, Manjushri of wisdom, and Vajrapani, right, of power. So in terms of the history of this Miksema supplication, in terms of how it came about, this was from a period of life where Lama Tsongkhapa had kind of matured and become elevated in his study and practice. And at that time, he wanted to make an offering to his teacher. So he actually offered this supplication and praise to his teacher, Jetsun Rendawa. Yeah, so then in terms of how this was offered, so Lama Tsongkhapa, and you can see the shorter one on page 13. So he offered the prayer, Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of non-objectifying compassion, Manjushri, master of stainless wisdom, Lord of secrets, destroyer of the entire host of Maras, Venerable Rendawa, crown ornament of the sages of the lands of the snow, Jenu Lodro, at your feet I make requests. So that is the prayer, how it was offered by Tsongkhapa. So Lama Tsongkhapa offered this to his teacher Jetsun Rendawa with the understanding that Rendawa was kind of the all-in-one embodiment of the holy beings, and specifically the embodiment of these 3 king bodhisattvas. So Jetsun Rendawa said that actually I do not possess these qualities that you praise me for. I am not in the nature of these 3 Lord Bodhisattvas. It is you who are in the nature of these 3 Lord Bodhisattvas. And at that point, it is said that Jetsun Rendawa offered the praise back to Lama Tsongkhapa, putting his name instead.
Jiserenda was at the Corolama in the Waton, Kujeki, Fujitongapa.
Oh, CJ.
Generally, Shala, someone there, Sate, Tapishala, someone there.
So then, when Lama Rendawa offered it back to Lama Tsongkhapa, so the first 3 lines of the prayer were the same, but the last 2 lines changed from Jetsun Rendawa, crown ornament of the sages of the land of the snows. This was changed to Tsongkhapa, crown ornament of the sages of the land of the snows. And then Jenu Lodro, which was Rendawa's given name, this was replaced with Losang Jagpa, one of Lama Tsongkhapa's names. At your feet, I make requests.
Oh, that and all that she will come back in Hallelujah, when you party, you give it a lot of them. That's on the
So this is the king of supplication prayers, this Migtsema, partly because it carries the blessings of 2 holy beings, the blessings of Tsongkhapa, who offered it, and then the blessings of Rendawa, who offered it back to Lama Tsongkhapa. So it is imbued with the blessings and intention of 2 great masters.
Oh, that yeah, barely in Italogy Momoyar, Nicola Coropatia, get to Pachela Subata, the Pasha in the red.
Yeah.
Oh, that's also with our Tojichibi Compotiali in the red.
And the recitation of the Migtsema to this day in Tibet and elsewhere, in terms of dealing with difficulties and obstacles, it is said that the recitation of Migtsema is a very beneficial way to clear those away. And similarly, in terms of amassing the causes to be able to achieve Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings, the practice of Migtsema is very efficacious.
Oh, that is on
So then, with this type of aspiration, we will engage in the recitation of the Ngapati, right? Yeah, we'll engage in the recitation of the 5-line Migtsema together. Yes, exactly where we are. Go to right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mime zewe de jin chere zi, jime jimbe wangbo jangbe yon, dupo malu jongze songwe da, gongche giwi suje songa pa, lozang jabe shala sowa de. Mime zewe de jin chere zi, jime jimbe wangbo jangbe yon, dupo malu jongze songwe da, gongche giwi suje songa pa, lozang jabe shala sowa de. Mime zewe de chin chin zi, jime jimbe wangbo jabe yon, dupa malu jangze songwe da, gongche giwi suje songa pa, lozang jabe shala sowa de. Mime zewe de chin chin zi, jime jimbe wangbo jabe yon, dupa malu jangze songwe da, gongche giwi suje songa pa, lozang jabe shala sowa de.
So recite quietly to yourself. Mime zewe de chin chin zi, jime jimbe wangbo jangbe yon, dupa malu jangze songwe da, gongche giwi suje songa pa, lozang jabe shala sowa. So now we'll go ahead to page 22, the request to abide at the heart. Oh, that's all right. Just a little bit down. There we go. Yep, a little bit up. Yes, yeah, you're right there.
Adin zawe lama rinpoche dagi, niga peme tense la, kanjin chebe gane jesunde, kusu dagi ngaja tadu.
Magnificent and precious root Guru, please abide on the lotus seat of my heart. Guide me with your great kindness and grant me the realizations of your holy body, speech, and mind.
Eden zawe lama rinpoche dagi ninga peme tensu la kanjin shenpo gune jizu de shuzan tumo gunju tsedu.
Magnificent and precious root Guru, please abide on the lotus seat of my heart. Guide me with your great kindness and grant me the supreme and common realizations.
Eden zawe lama rinpoche dagi ninga peme tensu la kanjin shenpo gune jizu de jangju nimbu padu tempo.
Magnificent and precious root Guru, please abide on the lotus seat at my heart. Guide me with your great kindness and remain steadfast until I attain the essence of enlightenment.
This one.
No, I do that.
No, don't do this one. So can they must
Ah.
Yeah.
So we'll do the brief dedication. Sera kundu gyawa tsonga be deshu senye ngusu tsepe tu yewe ngabe lansang de nire kanshe zayang dopa ma shi. By the force of the victorious one, Tsongkhapa, acting as our direct Mahayana virtuous friend in all our lives, may we never turn away, even for a second, from the pure path highly admired by the victorious ones.
What are Tangisi and it is a word that's a Basava in teaching the cancer, the nature prepares are what is it and Kandisi was.
So Geshe said that having engaged in that very brief practice of the Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga, especially for those of you who are maybe new to this, you're thinking like all of these visualizations, like that's a little bit weird. And is this kind of imaginary stuff really of any benefit? It's possible, right, that this doubt arises for some people. And so then, and so in order to understand the benefits and also the methods, the steps of the visualization, it's really important to look at the teachings of the Buddha and the various lamas who sort of explain this, right? We need to engage with those materials. Yeah. And we also have to understand that when we make supplication and visualize the holy beings, that although they might not appear directly to us, they are very much present, right? They do come when we think of them. And the Buddha himself made this promise that wherever the Prajna Paramita, wherever the perfection of wisdom sutras are studied and practiced, I am there, right? I am there in essence myself.
And Kedoji Jill was Kedoji Yobical Tosol to watching what the Lebicala or Tangilama to you and Lama to Chuchi, Alama to Yamare, Skoro, Sel over the Lebicala, and English.
And so it is said that after the passing away of Lama Tsongkhapa, right after the time of his passing away, one of the regents was Kedrupje, who's one of those two main disciples, right? And it is said that Kedrupje, he had some doubts, he had some questions about the Dharma, but he said, he was like lamenting that now my Lama has passed away, so I don't have a chance to ask these questions. And it is said that he thought of Lama Tsongkhapa, and then he actually had a vision of Tsongkhapa in the place in front of him. In fact, if you look at the biography of Kedrupje, it is said that he actually had a total of 6 visions of Lama Tsongkhapa where he was able to interact with his teacher. So it is said that Sorry, Geshe and I are not sure about how many interactions that Kedrupche had with these visions of Lama Tsongkhapa. It was either 5 or 6. But the point is that when Lama Tsongkhapa was asking the 4 or the 5 questions about sutra, he would see Lama Tsongkhapa in sort of his like bhikshu aspect. But then when he was asking about tantra, Lama Tsongkhapa appeared in the aspect of a Mahasiddha, right? In the aspect of a great tantric adept. So just by way of the story, we can understand that temporarily we might not be able to see their appearance directly, but that does not mean that they do not come to the place when we invoke them.
This one, oh, darling, you have to and it had you the mass, Yambochi Carriarsana, Keter Rambochi Tombolama Soka, Lotri Marwa, Kitu Marwas, and a Korope began, and it's on both Sevaja and watches on the.
So, also, just to speak a little bit more about the relationship between Lama Tsongkhapa and his disciple Kedrup. So, actually, Kedrup, when he first approached Tsongkhapa, he didn't approach Tsongkhapa wanting to take him as his teacher. He actually approached Tsongkhapa wanting to kind of debate and defeat him. Jumpe young Kedrup Jela loves And so before Kedrupche arrived in the presence of Lama Tsongkhapa, Manjushri had instructed Lama Tsongkhapa that if somebody comes to this place and starts trying to debate or argue the points, don't engage with them. You know, just continue with the teaching as you had planned. And so perhaps Geshe was saying that Manjushri had a doubt because Kedrupche was actually an excellent debater and had perfected the skill of debating in many previous lives. So Geshe was saying Manjushri was perhaps worried that if Lama Tsongkhapa engaged with him right away, Kedrup wouldn't be very impressed, and then he wouldn't be able to become his student. And so, in fact, that is what happened. Kedrup came to the place where Tsongkhapa was teaching, and Kedrup tried to kind of interject with some objections and begin a debate, but Tsongkhapa did not engage with him, right? He just continued with the teaching as he had planned. And so actually Kedrupche eventually gave up and he started listening to the teaching, and as he listened to Tsongkhapa's explanation, he thought Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings, this is something really incredible. He was very, very impressed, and in this way his mind became subdued enough so that he could become Lama Tsongkhapa's student. And Gyaltsabje, who was the other of the two chief disciples of Lama Tsongkhapa, it is said that he also didn't take a liking to Lama Tsongkhapa immediately, to the point that when Tsongkhapa was teaching, he actually came to like sit right on the edge of his throne. And Tsongkhapa once again did not engage with Gyaltsabje. He just kind of allowed him to sit there, and he just continued giving the teaching as he had originally planned. And
Tani college in near Sala Mazaka, Livishawachi, Suto Madawaji, is a college in Komatu.
And Gyaltsabje also very impressed, not only because Tsongkhapa dealt with that kind of obvious provocation in a very peaceful way, but also because he continued to teach the Dharma uninterruptedly, and he was very impressed with the Dharma that was taught. He eventually also became Tsongkhapa's student. So, of course, we weren't there at that time, so we weren't able to see those events directly, but we can look at the biographies of Tsongkhapa and his disciples to learn about these things. So J. Rinpoche, from a very young age, he is said to have been determined to understand emptiness, and he engaged in many practices of accumulation and purification to be able to do that. And then through those practices and through his engagement, he was able to come to a very refined view of that emptiness or ultimate truth. And so, as we said, this practice of Ganden Lagyama, or the hundreds of deities of Tushita, the Guru Yoga of Lama Tsongkhapa, it is said to be the supreme among Guru Yogas, and also contains the supreme of supplications, as we mentioned. And therefore, in terms of a practice to be able to accumulate merit and purify negativities, it is something that is very powerful. And so there's reasons also. We know that there are many different Guru Yoga practices. If we speak about two of the more well-known ones, we have this briefer practice of the Ganden Lagyama, the Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga, and we also have the more extensive Guru Puja, or the Lama Chupa. And so they have sort of like different angles, and they have fulfill different needs. So with this motivation, thinking that I want to achieve Buddhahood so that I can lead all 6 types of sentient beings within samsara to that very same state, may I become like Lama Tsongkhapa and be able to achieve enlightenment just as Lama Tsongkhapa did. Let us bring this forth as our motivation. The faults of my mind, and also the wholesome, positive mental qualities, neither of these are inherent or truly existent. Therefore, change is possible, definitely. So as not to waste this human rebirth with this precious human body, mind, and intelligence, as much as possible, I will direct my mind in the direction of love, compassion, and bodhicitta. I'm very fortunate to be able to have this precious mind with all of that potential, and to have this opportunity with this human life to put positive imprints within my mind through study and practice. So we'll pause there.
Oh, yeah, that they don't talk about your guitar, which you do the attachment, as soon as you compliment them, things that has to was also last music, that is.
So in our motivation, we talked about this wish to help all sentient beings to achieve the state of supreme enlightenment, Buddhahood. But we know that if we don't first achieve Buddhahood ourselves, it would be very difficult to do that. And then so in terms of these teachings that we were looking at, we have all of the methods to achieve that state of enlightenment.
Oh, that she do the master and to Zuameba, Tashido Damana, Zuameba, Sayo, and then is having to take you, then it should live Koropagasi, and Logi Van Mojitan, and also like Moshapate, to lead our
So if we want to have a beautiful harvest of many different kinds of fruits to be able to enjoy, we know that this starts with planting the seeds. And after we have planted the seeds in the ground, we then need to make sure that they get enough water and fertilizer. And actually, by engaging with the teachings as we are today, this is like the process of watering and fertilizing those wholesome seeds within us.
This one, what are they shouldn't jump to but no need to
And this is a really amazing thing, especially when we can kind of understand the reality of the fact that happiness is not something that is coming primarily due to external conditions, but happiness is primarily something that we cultivate internally.
Oh, that thing with the so nice at the Sonji Balata, Gonda was all day.
Yeah. And in terms of bringing this I or the self to the state of a Buddhahood, we could say that the door to that journey is really the mind of bodhicitta, the wish to achieve enlightenment for all beings. So often we hear people say, well, but what about my welfare? What about my well-being? But if you're concerned for your welfare, if you see yourself as important, then you understand that actually this is the best way to secure that welfare, is to enter the door of this practice towards Buddhahood or full enlightenment. And so then, in order to be able to reach this state, we look at this prayer, which is actually the practices of the bodhisattvas, and it is divided into various outlines. So as we recite each verse of the prayer, there's two things that we should be thinking about. That as much as possible, I'm going to engage in these practices in my life right now. And as much as possible, may I be able to, from lifetime to lifetime, meet and engage in these practices. So then in terms of the outlines, as we are going through, so we'll be reviewing these, and I actually found a translation of all the outlines. So I saved myself a bit of work, so we will use this translation. So the first is aspiration by means of pure intention. And then the next one is not forgetting bodhicitta.
This one, oh, that's about the Magi Vishavi Gunmemba, Makipa, Sere, Akos Dijan Let or Yambato, Sons of Yambala, Mandika,
So that was the next one is whatever practice, spiritual practice we engage in, whether hearing, contemplation, and meditation, making sure that it is not tainted by what is unwholesome or obscurations. So it's just like a lotus, right? It grows from the bottom of like a pond in the dirt, but as it comes and surfaces over the water, it is untouched by any of that dirt, right? That is not its nature. So in the same way, right, we are a human being whose body and mind are occupying an abode, a place within samsara, but we can use the opportunity that this human birth affords to give rise to a body and to a mental state that is completely separated from samsara or cyclic existence. So it's not easy to achieve, but we can understand it simply. As long as we remain under the control of karma and affliction, we are within samsara. Once we are able to free ourselves from karma and affliction, we are in the state of liberation. And, to be able to achieve that complete freedom from karma and affliction, if we think about it, this is something that is really quite amazing. And to achieve complete freedom, Geshe is just clarifying that complete absence of the afflictions from the mind is not necessary, right? It's a liberation from the afflictions. And it is said that freedom is achieved. So, for example, if we are cultivating the bodhisattva path, we bring forth this motivation of love and compassion, and then, excuse me, and then infused by that love and compassion, when we have a direct realization of emptiness, that freedom from difficulties is achieved at that moment. The liberation is achieved at that moment. And at that moment, you become an Arya, or a superior bodhisattva. That is a bodhisattva who is liberated from the tethers of karma and affliction. So just to be clear, at that moment, right, achieving that state of the Arya Bodhisattva, the superior Bodhisattva, there are still remnants of attachment, anger, and maybe and very subtle ignorance grasping at self. I'm like, but he realized emptiness. How's there? That's someone else asked that on the break, please. Sorry, I'm confused now. But anyways, so they have the subtle attachment, anger, ignorance grasping at the self, but because of that achievement of the Arya state, of the superior state, those things no longer disturb them, right? They're just like remnants there. He says, I don't study enough. I mean, yes, that's a given. Yes, that's true. So complete clearing away of karma and affliction, the complete clearing away of that is not required for liberation. But you do need that complete clearing away of karma and affliction, as well as the latencies or imprints, to achieve that state of Buddhahood, complete enlightenment. So then, as we come to the next part of the practice, it is bringing forth the temporary benefit and ultimate happiness of sentient beings. So what do sentient beings need on the temporary level, kind of on the immediate level, to be happier? And what do they need ultimately, right, to be able to achieve that ultimate state of happiness or liberation? So of course, all of these practices, they're kind of explained in a very vast way, and then you might think, like, how can I engage in that? But we mentioned already, right, that these practices start with those people that you meet every day, or maybe you have some animals in your lives that you interact with, right? It starts in your everyday life with the people, with the sentient beings that you are meeting, right? Working for their benefit.
어떻게 제시도 있는 내가 논지대도 있는 아고서로 어떻게 이나다 보겠냐 소소를 고가 뭐
We have lots of opportunities to practice bringing kindness and benefit to sentient beings, whether it is just showing somebody a smile, a pleasant expression, giving them encouraging words, and so forth. All of these are aspects of this practice.
어때야 나도 집안에 그게 만나는 이나 뭐 가신 좋아도야 내가 니네요냐 어때 뭐 세대를 때에서 더 본다 원요를 사고 이나요 갈래 파하려야 쉬워 빼져서 되는 뭐 좋아.
We see in the monastery, for example, people who originally enter monastic life, and they are like irascible, really difficult, maybe even angry. But from making a commitment to personal change, slowly, they become joyfully subdued and peaceful.
하고서를 어다 리치 워코는 좋아시라 뭐르키고요. 가래 소소소소라 붙은 좋아 또도 맞도 소소라 빨리가.
Of course, you know, the monastery is not a miracle. There are those who don't change at all, right? There are those who come in angry and difficult and stay angry and difficult. But this shows, right, that no place is perfect. Ultimately, that change, that transformation is something that is in our hand.
어다 저를 개인한 집안에. 저 데뷔가를 걸으셔한다고 지한테 저 대산이 가시요. 가시 저를
Also, you know, these long retreats that people are always talking about, you know, you have somebody who goes into retreat and they might have been a relatively peaceful, nice person, and they come out and they're like way worse than they were before they went in. And then you have some people who go in quite difficult and the retreat is really transformative and they come out peaceful, right? So it really depends on how you cultivate, right? Rather than the container.
다 됐어. 그게 배제 또도 맞도 공부 요요네 다 또대.
So are we using the teachings or not? And how can we know if we're using the teachings or not? We see if we've developed habituation to them, right?
그래서를 어떻게 좀 뭐요? 소소가 좋아 또는 레라워지가 또 좋아도야. 그게 다 그냥 되게 웃기잖아요. 그래서 가지까지.
And as we look at the teachings, if we really try to emphasize that aspect of application, there are practitioners for who a change will be quite easy, right? They'll really be able to bring forth a change. So what we're engaging with is Dharma, right? And an aspect of Dharma is transformation. We want to transform.
Yeah.
So we often talk about generating bodhicitta or about bringing forth bodhicitta. That is generating a vastness. That is generating an open-mindedness. So now we come to the next one, which is aspiration via wearing the armor. Aspiration via wearing the armor. So for those of you who are following in the text, we are on page 6. The fourth paragraph on page 6.
Yes, ma. Oda kocha goa senganzo pena mo anda wochi lina. Oda ndadu tali tali dita sikaya dita kidawo. Katini da bana kya jino.
So what do we mean by armor, right? Armor is like that body armor or that those metal plates that we wear when we go into war so that like arrows or bullets will not be able to harm us, right?
Oda ten nuji ngaroso ta pagesha shoji se drug ya thaba drug ya re ta shomba di drug ya tela ta pache ko chaba baba nuji te de was.
And so why do we need to be wearing armor? We need to be wearing armor because we have this resolve to practice the path to become a bodhisattva, to work towards liberation, to bring forth love, compassion, to try to generate bodhicitta. And we understand that if we're really determined to cultivate those things, we will encounter obstacles, obstacles falling like rain from the sky.
Akosarawa oda mimi jese karri naruso mo chinse se nazo mari ba se ha de cho kondo se ate ko mse de chi wo ke chama shawa de to da we ko baji na.
And so why is that the case though? When we try to cultivate those wholesome minds, why do we experience so many obstacles? It's because the unwholesome mind, self-cherishing, ignorance, grasping at the self, attachment, anger, aversion, these are not a story that just started this lifetime. We are habituated to these unwholesome thoughts from hundreds, thousands of previous rebirths. And we can see some of this through our own experience, right? When you encounter a minor problem, a minor discomfort or unhappiness, we immediately jump onto that problem. The mind obsesses with that problem. We become unhappy. Maybe even we become depressed. Why is this the case? Because of reifying the self, the capital letter I, too much. Because of holding on to the self too much. That's the reason. So we really can see this from our own experience if we look dispassionately, can't we? So many of the problems that we experience, it comes from this inflated attachment, this inflated sense of self or the I. Because of that, we are attached maybe to our body. We are definitely attached to the people close to us. And then when it feels like any of those things are threatened, we become uncomfortable. We become unhappy. We become depressed, right? And we can see the reality of this, that you can have two people experiencing the same problem, the same obstacle. One person will be beside themselves, upset about it, and the other person will be relatively undisturbed from the same problem. So what's the difference between those two people, right? It could be a number of factors, but a very likely possibility would be the difference in their attachment to themselves, the difference in their attachment to a particular circumstance or to the others around them. That will determine how seriously they experience the difficulty. Of course, this excessive attachment to the self, Geshe is just explaining this in kind of a very coarse way so that everybody can sort of conceptualize this. But ultimately, if we want to trace back to the root of the problem, we have to go to a more subtle layer, and we understand that ultimately the root is the self-cherishing attitude and ultimately the ignorance grasping at the self.
Yes,
So therefore, in order to prepare ourselves for these inevitable difficulties and obstacles when they come, we need to prepare a suit of armor. And just to be clear, this is not a physical armor outside of ourselves. This is an armor for the mind. Are you guys hearing us okay? Geshe has a doubt if our sound went out. Okay, all right. So in the Abhisamayalankara by the protector Maitreya, he proposes two tutors or two teachers, the inner tutor and the outer tutor. And so for beginner bodhisattvas on the path, out of the two teachers, the external teacher and the inner teacher, it is the inner teacher or tutor that is the most important for bodhisattva practitioners. So we have the outer teacher, right, which is the form of that, like the physical teacher, him or her, the teacher that you are connecting with. But this inner teacher, what is that? The inner teacher is our own practice of method and wisdom. So in terms of the connection with the outer teacher, all of us experience benefit from that. Like if we've been fortunate to receive teachings from His Holiness the Dalai Lama or Lama Zopa Rinpoche, we know that when we're listening to those teachings from His Holiness or from Rinpoche, our mind feels kind of like very peaceful and subdued, which is wonderful. But what's the problem? We can't be with His Holiness or with Rinpoche all the time, right? So who's with us all the time when we're not with His Holiness or when we're not with Rinpoche? Our mind is with us all the time, right? And so our mind has to be imbued with method and wisdom. And so that's actually one of the reasons that out of the outer teacher or the outer tutor and the inner tutor, it's the inner teacher, the inner tutor that is seen as more important. So kind of preparing this armor and wearing this armor, it's not necessarily the easiest part of the practice then, is it? So verse number 22. May I practice constantly for eons to come, perfecting the activities of awakening, acting in harmony with the various dispositions of beings, showing the ways of a bodhisattva. And so actually, when we look at the words of this verse, we can see that there are three key or three important meanings that are being expressed. Kare? Oh, gocha gonya diro. Yeah. Ale, tambola. Ale. So, Geshe, yeah, so something's interesting. The last verse in the Tibetan is, may I practice for eons to come. Geshe said that actually, may I practice for eons to come. You can think of this as being at the beginning of the verse because then it covers all of the points below it. But actually, whoever translated the English already put this bottom line at the beginning. So perfecting the activities of awakening or perfecting the conduct of awakening, that's the second line. We can understand that this is speaking of the activities of the body, the activities of the speech, and the activities of the mind. So that means perfecting. So to be able to practice perfectly all of the practices related to body, speech, and mind. So putting the imprints, engaging and trying to get those imprints for positive practices of body, speech, and mind starting right now from this life, but also in the future to be able to create the cause to practice them perfectly for eons and eons to come. So if we have a feeling for this, a wish to engage, a determination to engage with this, then actually what this is going to do, and it's important to understand this, especially as a beginner, this creates the foundation to have a stable, and happy mind all of the time.
So
you can have a mistaken understanding, right, when we go through this prayer, thinking these are all of the activities of bodhisattvas. So that doesn't relate to me, right? But that's not the kind of understanding that you want to have. What we're working towards is mixing love and compassion with our mind, like milk mixed together with water. And then what will happen is, no matter what those external difficult circumstances are, we'll be able to maintain a level of happiness, a level of contentment. Love and compassion, right? When we speak about love and compassion, they're often talked about in terms of others, right? So we understand that we are working towards benefiting others. But from the moment when we're first starting to bring forth love and compassion within our mind, it's going to be quite a long time until we're able to directly benefit others in a meaningful way. But from the moment that we bring forth that love and compassion within our consciousness, what we will see is we are elevated, right? We become happier. We're the first beneficiary. When the mind is subdued, there is peace. An unsubdued mind cannot be peaceful. As much as we mix love and compassion together with our mind becomes more subdued, and there is greater happiness.
And
that is why Lama Tsongkhapa said the words, those kind of very heavy, meaningful words, that through working for the welfare of others, all of one's own welfare is naturally achieved. And so acting in harmony with the various dispositions of beings. Semchen dagi chupa tumbarju. Huh? Yeah, so Geshe said also, as we go through these 3 points within the verse, keep in mind all of these are related to the point of practicing for eons to come. So we're hoping to practice all of these points for eons to come. So in whatever place you're born, so obviously in this rebirth, we're in the place now that we occupy, and so we try to be in accordance with that, but then also praying that in every future rebirth, that we may act in harmony with the dispositions of those beings in whatever place we find ourselves in the future. And in this way, right, when we are able to act in accordance with the disposition of others, in accordance with the wishes of others, we become harmonious with others. They become our friends and our allies. And so the next one is showing the ways of a bodhisattva. So from perfecting the activities of awakening and trying to work in harmony with their dispositions, then we are in a position to show the ways of a bodhisattva, to lead them to love, compassion, developing bodhicitta, in other words, through teaching, through guiding them in the Dharma. And we pray that we may be able to do this and to guide them in this positive direction from lifetime to lifetime until we achieve the state of Buddhahood, the state of enlightenment. So we're gonna, I think Geshe wants to pause the King of Prayers here, and he said that since we were talking about Lama Tsongkhapa and a little bit about the history of Lama Tsongkhapa on this special day, we should at least touch on Lama Tsongkhapa's text in praise of dependent arising. Sorry, I just need to orient myself as to where we are. Just give me a second. Emaho tumpa, emaho. Yeah, so we are on verse number 8. So emaho, you might have heard, like, that's a very distinctive sound. You might have heard emaho. That's translated here as wondrous. So verse number 8, wondrous teacher, wondrous refuge, wondrous speaker, wondrous savior. I pay homage to that teacher who taught well dependent origination. So through Lama Tsongkhapa's engagement with the teachings, through his extensive practices of accumulation and purification, then he was able to perceive the truth of dependent arising, just like we were able to look at a flower. And on the basis of understanding the truth of that dependent arising, then he offers homage to the teacher. Sangela, yeah, and offers to the teacher, the Buddha. So Tsongkhapa is offering the praise to the teacher, the Buddha. So a wondrous teacher, because a wondrous teacher who is able to teach that which will free us from samsara and also the causes of samsara. Teachers whose teaching allows him to lead both ourselves and others to a state of perfect happiness. So he does this just as Oh, and so kutsu Tsongkhapa ziba susiba. Ale. Yeah. Ale. Right. So having seen this truth of dependent arising, the Buddha offers it to us, to sentient beings, and so we pay homage to that teacher. So based upon that, this first proclamation, wondrous teacher, emaho teacher. Wondrous refuge, understanding that it is through the teachings of the Buddha that beings can be protected from the suffering of samsara in general and the lower realms in particular. Because the teaching provides that refuge, we offer homage to that teacher of refuge, emaho refuge, wondrous refuge. So we often, one of the names of the Buddha is the teacher of refuge. Yeah. Wondrous speaker, so a wondrous speaker who is able to speak the truth of dependent origination, dependent arising, based upon Lama Tempas and the Lama Tempa Korongi Koyala. Right, is able to speak this directly because of having experienced this dependent arising himself. Wondrous savior, so somebody who works to provide refuge or protection to all sentient beings without differentiation, without thinking about whether they have benefited him in the past or not. So in this way, emaho savior. So I pay homage to that teacher who taught well dependent origination. So in terms of the main sort of the key thing that he taught, understanding this dependent origination or dependent arising, I offer prostration. I pay homage to him. This one, that's so teaching the one you are saying that Malaysia, Mongolia, that's so Malaysia, so you are about you are telling me about Chasolma. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So the Buddha proclaimed dependent arising. He proclaimed dependent origination without differentiation between sentient beings. He proclaimed it equally for everyone. So whether we are able to realize this or not, this is something that depends upon our own efforts. So because he proclaims this truth equally to all without differentiation, we offer homage, we offer prostration to that teacher. So we should also understand that in terms of the Buddha's capacity to bring forth and to perfect, to get stronger and stronger this love and compassion, to get stronger and stronger all of those positive mental qualities, all of these are connected to this understanding of dependent arising, dependent origination. And in the same way, like us, if we are able to use this to help our seeds, like fertilizing them and watering them, then we too can come to a better and better understanding. And also remember that this happens connected with others, which is why the son of the conqueror Shantideva said that all of you, you kind of pay homage, you reify the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, not realizing that everything you achieve also happens in dependence upon sentient beings. So this is just touching a little bit on these teachings of dependent arising. So let us bring forth this determination to expand our understanding of dependent arising, dependent origination, beginning with the coarser levels and going more and more subtle. And may we be able to bring forth an understanding and to become like Lama Tsongkhapa. So thank you very much. We shall dedicate the merits. And after we dedicate the merits, please do feel free to get on with your day. I know it's a busy time of year, but if you'd like to stay for questions, you're very welcome.
Jangju Zimju Rimbo Je Ma Je Mano Jenju Je Chewa Nyamba Me Pa Yo One Bondo Bewa Dongi Tawa Rimbo Je Ma Je Pano Jenju Je Chewa Nyamba Me Pa Yo One Bondo Bewa Jambel Power Jitar Kempa Kundo Zambo de on de Jede Deda Kungi Jiza Dalo Gewa Dida Tanjera Domo Dusa Shepi Gewa Donjege Gawa Kamuna Juda Bade Dagi Sawa Yekujo Zambo Chuji Rabdu Mowa.
May our merits become a cause for all 6 types of sentient beings within samsara to bring forth a perfect practice of method and a perfect practice of wisdom. Through the power of our merits, may all of the wars, all of the pandemics, diseases, and so forth, spreading within different corners of samsara, may these be completely pacified. So we'll pause there.
Yes.
Yes, yeah. So I'll just turn on the volume in case there are questions.
좋아요 좀 해.
Oh yeah, sorry. Geshe is just asking me to let you know that, of course, next Sunday, being Christmas Day, we won't have a teaching, but you will not have to wait too much longer to see us again, assuming you're worried about that, because over the New Year's holiday, we have that retreat coming up, which we talked about. So Geshe wants to extend his best wishes to you if you are celebrating Christmas and certainly for the new year. And he hopes that all of you and also those close to you will be well and happy during this holiday period. And also he has the hope and the aspiration that all of us in this new year, that we can bring forth a greater understanding and improvement in our study and practice of the teachings. So if there are questions, please go right ahead.
I have questions. I always have questions, sorry.
Yo, Lisa, yes, I recognize that voice. Go right ahead.
Okay, so I was wondering, I have issues around uncertainty. And I've heard that uncertainty can be like an allergy. Sometimes people have a big reaction to it, and sometimes people have, and it doesn't bother other people, and I have like a big reaction to uncertainty. And I'm wondering, like, how does that fit into the self, That's what I was wondering. And I also had another question. Did you want me to ask that question, or did you want me to wait for the answer for this one?
Yeah, no, let's do first one first, just so I can be more precise in my translation, Yolisa, and we'll come back to you for the second one.
Okay.
Yeah, so the denden mepa roa tempo mepa gineso denden mepa mi kashe chi koronso neso denden mepa konso halepe truk drogio mare roa konso shiwa chene de tugire tuas mi kashe denden mepa yana dopa yonana konso halepe tsagi tsigi dang kale kapo chik tsigire tua like denden mepa kanes juru jaktuba dang mitupa dagi seria di da kolagi samlo tang 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 jewa kandis chikires.
That they do this you wonder what it has, because I was watching the shoot chat over. Watching the Kazi shoot chat over in it, that dollar chapi chapa chega was the doll Kazita Chimbozo, then chapas and Amudu Chimbozo shoot over Yona, never did the United, so not on there.
So actually, this is related to self-cherishing, and self-cherishing means grasping at our own welfare benefit too much. This comes from an excessive attachment to the I, to the self, and because of that sort of self-centeredness and that inflated sense of the self, then even if there's a small amount of uncertainty, things are going just a little bit not according to plan, we become disturbed, right? We get nervous.
So nearly in the so the Telichala in the how levy chopper chetana. One of the days Marina also put in
We see this with many people, right? I mean, in terms of the people close to them, even in terms of their possession, right? For example, their car. If just a little bit of damage or a little bit of disturbance happens to the people close to them or happens to the car, because of their excessive attachment, they become very disturbed and unhappy, right?
But that's also what about
So at the root of all of this always is this attachment to the self, this attachment to the capital letter I. But in terms of how it plays out, right, that's also connected to people's life stories and to their ways of thinking.
강에 못해서. 이나 이렇게 가서 다 뒤치 나 기대. 다 매나 나 로드는 봐. 제가 좀 말해야 돼.
Ale.
그러선지.
So to relate this a little bit to something practical, there's a story that Geshe thought of, and this story was of an old monk at his monastery. And for those of you who have been to India, you know what an auto rickshaw is. It's a three-wheeler, a three-wheel vehicle like a taxi. So there was an old monk who was walking, and he was hit by the auto rickshaw. And because he was hit, actually his leg was damaged quite badly, and he had an injury that he had to contend with. But when he first got hit by the auto rickshaw, he said, how wonderful that this is happening to me now. It's allowing me to purify some negative karma. If I didn't purify this negative karma, I probably would have died a lot sooner. That was the sort of mentality he had around it. And he was not a monk who was considered like a scholar or a great practitioner. It was an injury serious enough that he had to use a cane for the rest of his life. But because of his way of thinking about it, it didn't bring any real disturbance to his mind.
So
of course we can't know what people's hidden aspects or qualities are, but this monk manifested somebody who hadn't really studied particularly well and didn't seem to maybe know very much, but yet he was able to use his practice very effectively in that situation. So even putting the question of the self aside, when we encounter a problem, the way that we approach it and the way that we think about it, that can have a major impact on how much the problem does or doesn't disturb us. Yeah? So question number 2, if you could do it kind of concisely, Yolisa.
Actually, he answered it.
Okay, cool. All right.
About the inner teacher and recognizing that it's the inner teacher that informs us about like how to subdue the mind. So thank you very much.
Awesome. No, I'm glad it was helpful, Yolisa. Barchedi Candice Samlo Tankures. So it is very much how we look at the situation, right? If we look at this situation as something horrible, as something bad, that's going to increase the suffering that we experience related to it. But if we try looking at it from another angle, looking at what it could teach us, for example, then that situation can be transformed quite effectively.
Right.
Yes. Thanks, Yolisa. So there's another great Lama in Dharamsala. So Dharamsala is that town in northern India where His Holiness the Dalai Lama lives. And one day he was kind of walking, maybe it was like a little bit later at night, and he encountered some thieves. And the thieves kind of like forcefully took all of his possessions and everything he was carrying with him. Yeah. So he's carrying quite a few valuable things with him and also quite a lot of money. And the thieves basically took everything. So at first he was actually beside himself with anger. He was like completely paralyzed by rage about what had happened. Yeah. And so, but when he got home, he started to try to change the way he was thinking about it. He said, that thief, there's some people here who are very poor. What if he had children that he had no other way to support? And if I was his child that didn't have enough to eat or didn't have any clothes, how would I feel? So he started to think about it that way. If I was his child and my father was willing to take that risk to do something to help me, I would think he was a pretty great father, actually. How pitiful his situation must be, that the only way that he's able to help his family is through stealing something from somebody else. And so through kind of going through these lines of reasoning, he was completely able to change his attitude to the situation. And really, someone who's skillful is someone who knows how to use these different ways of thinking about things. But we see that for most of us, what we do is like when a problem comes, then we worry about that problem, then we inflate that problem, then we start thinking about the other problems that might arise because of that problem, and we just feed more fuel to the situation, right? That's what most of us do. Someone who's skillful can use a different angle of thinking about the issue so that a lot of the disturbance, a lot of the difficulty is actually cleared away. Yeah. So how we look at something is going to make a huge difference in terms of how we experience it. So transforming obstacles into the path, that practice can be actualized simply by looking at something in a different way, right? So I see that Dave has a hand up. Go ahead, Dave.
Hi.
Hi there.
Yep. This is a question from Richa in Delhi. She's asking two related questions. So I'll read the first one. In the 12 links of dependent origination, the first link is the ignorance. In the ultimate truth of union of emptiness and bliss, there is no ignorance anymore. So would it be correct to understand that dependent origination is only at the level of relative truth and not an ultimate truth?
Great. So Dave, because this question is quite precise, I'll ask this one first, and then we'll come back for part two of her question. Is that all right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, nganso di Richa Agawati Delhi gi mi chikwa, nganso di tenje gi yan lak chuni samlo thangna, dene tenje gi yan lak chuni nanglo la tambo di maripachik res rwa. Ine nganso di kandes la kare, nganso di dundam dempa sena tompa ni dam dewa champo yerwa mepa gi dundagdi rwa. Dene di sena rwa marigpa mepache. Di dabuchik samlo tangnana, dene tenje seria di rwa dundam dempa mares, kunzok dempa resa. Tenje. Tenjum.
Yeah, it dembore dembores. Tende korosena, tende tenju korozalavaina.
Correct in the sense that yes, both dependent arising, or we could say dependent origination, these are not ultimate truth, they are relative truth.
This one, but
if we understand perfectly the most subtle level of dependent arising, but we understand that until we realize emptiness, we cannot understand the most profoundly subtle level of dependent arising. And also tambo tompani hako gres, dene tenjum tramo. Yes. So in terms of the dependent arising and the dependent origination, on the coarser levels, yes, you may have understood a lot of those things already. But it's interesting to think that that most subtle, profound level of dependent arising, one has to realize emptiness first as a preliminary to be able to realize that most subtle dependent arising.
Yes,
and at first, right, when we're first having our valid cognition of emptiness, because the mind has to remain sort of very refinedly focused on emptiness, there's not space in the mind to also be contemplating dependent arising.
근데 요즘 세지 단 노류이나 세진다 지금 덴바 매 요아 말에 로지지 요아 말에 되네 이나요 파티티바데 늘이 요아로 다니디 요아.
So in the sutra system, we can't contemplate this together, but as we come to that valid cognition of emptiness, we can then go back into the direction of saying it is not as if things do not exist at all. Things exist conventionally because they are dependent arising. So one goes back into dependent arising.
아니 나세한테 로지지 접어도 문제가 되네. 이나 로지지 접어 되네. 매나요 매비티니 아니 파티 대화용게 아니 내서 하기 좀
We can also think the I or the self is not inherently existent. It is not naturally or truly existent, but it is not as if it is not there at all, because there is an I, there is a self that is talking, listening, eating food, experiencing happiness and suffering, and so forth. And so it's at that moment, after that, understand, it is after we have that valid cognition of emptiness and then turn back to the contemplation on dependent arising that the most subtle level of dependent arising can be understood. Before that realization of emptiness, we can think a lot about dependent arising, and we can even have an understanding of the coarser levels of dependent arising, certainly.
tenju koro tumbani koro tenju chamore
tenju chamore tumbani serie de tenju chamore
tenju chamo koro kudo de bare ma de tuni mares.
So emptiness is, so the paradox is here, emptiness is a subtle dependent arising. Tumbani di tenjun chamores tenjun di tompa mares
tenju chamode tumbani mares.
Yet that subtle dependent arising is not an ultimate truth. It's a relative or a conventional truth. So that's the paradox here. But it's really interesting, right? Because that very subtle dependent arising, although it's a relative, a conventional truth, one has to have had that realization of emptiness in order to be able to comprehend it. Yeah. And sorry, Dave, was there a second part to Richa's question?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Second question. How can anger and attachment be transformed into wisdom of emptiness by using Lama Tsongkhapa's elucidation of dependent arising?
Nanso Dechak dang Kongcho Seria di Je Rinpoche Tenjagi Topa la Tene Tongni Tokpe Sherab Kandes Gyorwa Jogires. I just want to make sure I heard the question correctly, Dave, so I'm going to say it back to you. How can, on the basis of Lama Tsongkhapa's instructions of dependent arising, can we transform anger and attachment into the wisdom realizing emptiness? Was this the question?
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, we.
Yeah.
Me that tende tevala tene ani tende do tenju se at ngazo kaze to so loju so ya to ta te kanji te ba shi was.
So the first step is we have to think dependent arising or dependent origination based on our study and practice. Like, what does this actually mean? Like, what is dependent arising or dependent origination like?
Ta kaze phoge te te ya cherndona. 하고서 나로서 그 대화 또 두마세 대화 소소 예 집어들 대화 많이.
Yeah. And if we understand this in a vaster way, we can see that our happiness and our suffering, this isn't something that just happens independently, just on the basis of ourselves, or even necessarily on the people close to us. In fact, if we understand that, that all of our happiness is arising not just because of ourselves, not just because of those close to us, but indeed connected with all sentient beings. That is a dependent arising. And if we understand that, then we'll understand why it's inappropriate to get angry at sentient beings, for example.
Only became as a little was an Alex Cassiwachilla. Naros Mateo Poch de Alayo. Lido say Yabodeka was. Lydia and a year Cadilla to the Hakosara.
Yeah.
Say about the Alana year at an operation about so what it was not. So about the Niji would do.
Yeah.
Hakoso.
Konso Yapotona, Jambadang Nijirans.
My conso minutes in the Yajela and you could do us about the Niji.
Attachers us good.
Send the Lee about the Alana, Jerry colored Momba, she colored Mombo,
Yes,
English to what it was.
Yeah.
Take what the Valana, so I mother to roll did you ask?
Yeah. Then it,
so the engine had catch Moyaba.
Ale, then it, the Jambadang Ninja.
Since that, they show about the humanity you go about.
Yeah. And so also, if we think about what is maintaining our physical health, right? It is also the kindness of others, all the food that we're able to purchase, the things that we need for our survival. This arises due to others, so that is a dependent arising. Similarly, our momentary day-to-day happiness, we are not an island. It depends upon our interactions with others, our interactions with those who we encounter, those who are close to us. And so we see that also that is a dependent arising. And if we understand that, then we'll see why it is inevitable that it's important to have a loving and compassionate attitude towards others. So it can all be connected, right? Through Lama Tsongkhapa's instructions, which help us to understand dependent arising, we can see how actually all of these are relationships of dependent arising. Listen. So hopefully that answered Richa's question.
Yeah.
Anything else, Dave?
Richa saying, thank you, Geshe, for a fantastic explanation. This is very, very clear.
Yeah,
I have a question following upon Richa's question. So,
yeah, Dave, go ahead.
So Geshe spoke about understanding dependent arising in a more coarse perspective for helping to overcome anger and attachment. But what about the subtle conventional nature of our experiences, where we're composing circumstances which are really a function of our karma? So if we saw
composing what?
So the circumstances that look like they're out there that are causing our attachment and anger,
yeah,
they're really a composition of our minds as a function of karma. So you could also could you also say that our it's all karmic appearance that is a subtle dependent arising based on our own minds.
Right. Again, ngumagi triwadi nanso tenjun rapala tene hako tsarson rwa dene tenjun rapala tene chatsangwa de didang jawayeres nanso dedu midang jawayeres chetsang dene de control the yongyu yomares dabochik samlo tangna rwa ine nanso di tenjun tramo di samlo tangna dene nanso namgin nanso chunken la tene netsu la tene kibo mepa dabochik chagire dua roa ine nganso kibo mebagi netsu di semla tene chumares karien sena semdi nganso legi jebu dabuchik nyongi yore duas dene dela tene nganso di tenjung charmola tene control dang decha denso jebuja yore besa
there was dan decha do control kandi jina yo So the dance Mari Party
So yes, this is correct, but we should take it back to the underlying principle, which is that attachment and anger arise based upon this idea that there is some pinpointable, truly existent essence to something findable, yeah?
The Rapa Noachi you are there, but Kejamaris. They try to control.
Yeah.
Colonel Sons of Tisabotel Carriers and they try to control
So the subtle level is not that sort of coarser level of appearance of the person or the situation that is making us angry or making us distraught, we understand that the dependent arising of this unpleasant experience is actually coming at that mistaken perception of inherent existence that we have. Subtle dependent arising is telling us that this appearance of findability or of solidity of that person or situation that is making us angry, that there's no findable essence there at all. That's a mistaken appearance. Yeah, we're creating the self of that person, right? Who we find difficult, right? Where is that pinpointable self of the person? Where can you find it? You'll see that it's not findable. If we can get rid of that false sense of something findable related to the ignorance grasping at the self, then that false sense of findability that is fueling our attachment and our anger, we can definitely overcome that. And in this way, if we're able to understand the profundity of dependent arising, then that situation that may have like disturbed us so much, we kind of see the ridiculousness of it in a way. It becomes something almost laughable. Meaning also the legi social we haven't been able to see that these appearances of all of those things being truly existent are just like a conjurer's, just like a magician's illusions. When we understand the subtle dependent arising, we will be able to see all of these appearances as being like a magician's illusions. If we see that that appearance of true existence is just like a magician's illusion, if we understand that it's an illusion, there's going to be no basis for the arising of anger or attachment in our mind. And then in terms of karma, the whole basis for the accumulation of the karma that's going to lead to those negative experiences, that is eliminated. And then similarly, the previously accumulated karma before this understanding, it is said that it's like rain falling on snow. It will eventually be dissolved. Yeah, because so this attachment to that true existence, this is like one of the roots that compels us to that accumulation of karma. And that attachment is also one of the main things that is watering those karmic seeds until they bring forth a result. If we can understand that dependent arising, this is also very useful. Dave, I feel like did we connect with your point about karma? I feel like we didn't emphasize that angle enough.
It's okay. I want to realize this.
Okay, all right. Maybe we have to have a longer discussion at some point in the future, but I felt like we got sort of a meandering answer, but not on that particular angle of your question.
Yeah.
Geshe thinks the answer was fine. It's Kendrick's fault if it wasn't. Yeah, I'm a dependent arising in this equation, unfortunately.
If one were to follow this a little bit further, I guess with karma, it would be how does one explain karma as a dependent arising?
Karma di tenjung dabores kandes treshi jago peredua. Le serie di tenjung reduas, le tenjung kande yimbasa.
Le tenju kande yubasana to dadri yani la was kare. Le tenju kande siresana. Le tela tenju res. Kanun lo to tombo ko ywa kanun ji go du mo cha. Akasara ta tela tene le ka che jetu che mo ji go was.
So we could say that karma is a dependent arising because the action that accumulates the karma has to have a motivation that brings forth the will to do that action. And similarly, based upon that motivation or the will to do the action, then we need to have other conditions coming together to enable us to complete the action. So all of these are the various parts that bring forth the action, which are dependent arising. And similarly, there needs to be a place where the potential of that karma is stored, right? Where the potential of that seed of karma remains. So that's another dependent arising part of the equation of how karma happens. Yeah, and so like we know that karma can't just stay as kind of like a coarse thing on the outside, right? It has to exist as a potentiality somewhere, right? And we also know in terms of ripening, whether we're talking about the ripening of wholesome karma, whether we're talking about the ripening of unwholesome karma, it can sometimes take a very long time for that karma to be ripened into a result. So we understand that there are conditions that need to manifest for the resultant side of karma to occur. And so it is holding on to that subtle I or that subtle self. So holding on to that karma is the subtle I or the subtle self. That's where that potential is stored, or the extremely subtle wind and mind. So here are yet more components of that dependent arising. Yeah. So the cause is part of the picture, the condition is part of the picture, the container which holds the potential of those imprints that will later ripen, that's part of the picture. So it's actually a very complex set of dependent arisings.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome, Dave. You're welcome, Dave. You're welcome, Dave. Lots to discuss and unpack here. Yeah. So I guess if there are no more questions, yeah, we just wish everybody a happy holiday, whatever you are celebrating. Geshe is asking, Dave, are there more questions? Did you have more questions?
I don't think so.
Yeah. He just wants to make sure I'm not jumping ahead. So if there are so if there are no questions, then let me wish all of you a happy holiday and a wonderful upcoming year ahead. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you all. So Geshe said we've engaged in this practice together with something beneficial, with something virtuous. So in this way, we have a cause to be able to kind of like relax and enjoy our holidays and enjoy the new year. So thank you very much. Greetings and Tashi Dele to everybody.